So AMD just announced the RDNA3 card some hours ago, and let me tell you right away, if NVIDIA maintains their pricing, they're dead. This because AMD just announced the 7900 XTX, yes, XTX. We have the XT and the XTX version for $1,000, so $600 less than the 4090, while performing the same in rasterization, consuming less power, and being way better than the previous generation in terms of ray tracing. So, price performance, they're there. Not even counting on all the other things that AMD presented in terms of software and hardware as well, because they were really interesting. And you can say, but the 4090 is faster. $999. But well, we had lots of things like results, power draws, and etc. in this presentation. So let's go into it. Today's video sponsor is GGG. Where using my SKG discount code leads to a 25% off across several products, making a Windows 10 serial key only $16. After the payment, you'll receive the key in your account, and all you need to do is to introduce it in your Windows settings, and bam! You have an activated system. So firstly, AMD actually started talking about the chiplet design. They're actually showing the 6 nanometers MCM. Basically, the memory controllers are made with 6 nanometers, a more matured 6 nanometers lithography, while the graphics compute die works with 5 nanometers. Okay, so the best die for the compute units, of course, the compute die, and the more mature die for the memory controller that doesn't need 5 nanometers in any possible way, because it's a memory controller. You can just chip out on the memory controller and make way cheaper GPUs. $999. Anyway, then they went to show the 6900 XTX with 61 teraflops, a major improvement over the RDNA2. For example, the 6950 XT had 24 teraflops. We're going to 61 teraflops with 5.3 terabytes per second chiplet interconnection speed, with 24 gigabytes of GDDR6, and 58 billion transistors in a chip. This is crazy. 58 billion transistors. Technology has moved so fast in the last 10 years. Crazy. Then we have AMD showing 54% increase in performance per watt, and this is not raw performance, this is performance per watt compared to RDNA2, and then we have a new cooler design, which, if you ask me, looks way better than the previous one. The previous one already looked cool compared to the 5000 series, much better. But this one, with that red line on the right side, only 2 8-pin connections and so on, it's really good looking. Also, we have the second generation Infinity Cache with a peak bandwidth of 2.7 times higher than the first generation. So we have the Infinity Cache on the RDNA2 cards, the RX 6000 series, which is basically what AMD calls an L3 cache on the GPU. Okay, we have on the CPU we have level 1, level 2 and level 3 cache, and on the GPU we now have a huge level 3 cache on the RDNA3 GPUs. They were the first to introduce that amount of cache, and that amount of cache actually helps a lot in terms of gaming. Okay, so you can narrow the buzz width a bit and increase the cache, and you'll still have higher bandwidth. And we now have a second generation of Infinity Cache that leads to a peak of about 2.7 times higher than RDNA2, which is once again great, just great. Then they proceeded to talk about several things, but one of them was, for example, the better AI, with dedicated AI accelerators, also with up to 2.7 times more performance and up to 50% more performance per compute unit in terms of ray tracing. And I'm telling you this because this is 50%, take note that this is 50% per compute unit. But take in consideration that we have more compute units on the 7900 XTX and the 7900 XT than on the 6950 XT. The 6950 XT have something like 80 compute units. Yes, they have it had 80 compute units, while the 7900 XTX has 96 compute units and the 7900 XT has 84. Okay, so all of them have a bit more, so they will perform better than 50% in terms of ray tracing, okay? Higher than that. Then they proceeded to show the new Radeon display engine with DisplayPort 2.1, supporting up to 8K 165Hz or 4K 480Hz at 12-bit color depth. So supporting 12-bit color depth is fine, but we have 8K 165Hz. Nobody's gonna use that, of course, but it's nice to have. I mean, if you're paying for a top-tier GPU, you want all the features that you may have or that you can have. You want all of them because you're paying for a top-tier GPU, okay? And then you have 4K 480Hz, so if you are one of those fanatics that want to play, let's say, at 4K 240Hz or even more than that, you have DisplayPort 2.1 in these cards, which is nice. After that, we have mentions to the dual media engine, which is a very, very interesting thing, even more for people wanting to make video production or even wanting to stream. This is very, very important. So we have simultaneous encode and decode for the AVC and AGVC codecs, AVC being the H.264 and the AGVC being the H.265, 8K 60 AV1 encode and decode, so 8K 60 FPS of AV1 encode and decode. This is crazy. AV1 has a very, very good image fidelity in terms of codecs. Okay, it is superior compared to the AGVC, which is already way better than the AVC. And we have AV1 at up to 8K 60, which is insane. And we have the AI enhanced encoding, which they didn't talk much about, but I mean, they will most likely improve. It will most likely improve the performance of the encoding and decoding, I believe, with 1.8 times the engine frequency compared to the RDNA2 cards. That's a very, very nice thing. Interesting, to say the least. So if you're going to stream or record, like I do lots of recording, for example, for my YouTube videos, I can now actually record, encode and decode with AV1, which will bring way better image fidelity in terms of YouTube videos, okay? That's a very nice thing, okay? Then they went and showed a very interesting thing as well with the decoupled frequencies with the shader engine and front end. This led to up to 25% power saving while bringing 15% higher frequency on the front end. So instead of having both at, let's say, 2 GHz, they actually managed, or 2.1 GHz, they actually managed to put the front end at 2.3 GHz, so higher frequency on the front end, while actually decreasing a bit the frequency of the shader engine, delivering up to 25% better power efficiency. And this is important. If power efficiency isn't important for you, well, for me it is, because I would never get a GPU consuming more than 350 watts. That's just not for me. And even there, I would undervolt it for better performance. So yeah. And well, like I told you before, we have now the 61 teraflops of the RDNA3 versus the 23 teraflops on the RDNA2 with the 6950 XT. If you want a comparison, for example, the RTX 4090 has 82 teraflops and the 3090 Ti has 40 teraflops. So even with 40 teraflops, we have 40 teraflops on the 3090 Ti and we have 23 teraflops on the 6950 XT. So basically almost half the teraflops on the 6950 XT, and yet the 6950 XT outperforms the 3090 Ti in some titles in terms of rasterization. So the teraflops themselves alone aren't really interesting in terms of gaming because they won't affect the gaming performance much. But well, it is always good to have more teraflops because it means that your computing performance will be way higher. And in this case, it was a huge increase of almost 3 times the teraflops. Just insane. After all this time, we had some results of the 6900 XTX versus the 6950 XT with native 4K, with up to 1.7 times faster, okay? So up to 70% increase in rasterization performance, okay? And even in terms of ray tracing, we have Resident Evil Village using ray tracing up to 1.5 times faster, so 50% faster with ray tracing, also 50% faster with ray tracing on Metro Exodus, and 60% faster on Doom Eternal. Although Doom Eternal has a very low level of ray tracing, so it is quite normal to have that development since we have second generation ray tracing. Then they proceed to show you the actual power consumption of the 7900 XTX, consuming only 355 watts total board power. If you want to compare this with the previous GPUs, we have the 6950 XT with 335 watts, so we have up to 70% increase in performance for 20 watts more. That's amazing. And if you compare to the 4090, you have 450 watts, okay? So 100 watts more than the 7900 XTX. And the 7900 XTX has 98 compute units versus the 80 compute units on the 6950 XT. So more physical units, a bit less frequency, 2.3 GHz, but more physical units, more performance at only 20 watts more. That's amazing. If you ask me, amazing. And let's not forget about the 7900 XT with $899, but only 300 watts, 84 compute units, so a bit more than the 6950 XT, 4 compute units more, but only 2 GHz instead of the 2.4 GHz or the 2.5 GHz, so 500 MHz less, but also less power draw and more performance at $899, while the 6950 XT was released at $1,099. So it's a win-win situation. And then they proceed to actually show the dimensions and throw some shots at the competition.
Performance per watt. There's no need to rebuild your desktop, no need to upgrade your case, and there's no need for a new power adapter. Yep. We made it as easy as pulling out your old card and putting in a new one.
They actually show some games with the performance with FSR, but they don't show the native performance, so we can't actually know how much better the performance with FSR will be compared to the native, because we don't have a base to compare. Bad AMD, bad. So performance-wise, the RDNA3 cards should perform way better in terms of the upscaler, so they should not lose, or they should gain more performance with the upscalers, since they are ready with AI improvements in terms of performance to handle the upscaler algorithms better, in a better way, delivering more performance than the previous generations. Not only because they are faster, but also because the AI is better with these cards. Then we proceed to some more 8K ultra-wide and 8K results with the FSR, with some games like Death Stranding, or some games like the Uncharted, Legacy of Thieves, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And after this we have more FSR tests now with the 7900 XTX versus the 6950 XT, but also once again FSR, okay? So we have way better performance, and if we look at the image we can actually see that the newer generation cards, the RDNA3 card with ray tracing, can actually get higher performance from the upscaler, okay? They have higher base performance, of course, because they're faster, up to 50% or up to 70% in some scenarios, I mean, but they do gain considerably higher performance with the upscaler. For example, if we go to Dying Light Stay Human, we actually go from 39 FPS with the upscaler to 72 FPS, and that's a lot of difference. So if you take in consideration the upscaler improvements on this card, so the upscaler performance improvements together with the raw performance improvement, well, in some games the performance will be very interesting, going in this case from 39, even with FSR 2.0 to 72 FPS, unless they're using the FSR 3.0, but I don't believe they're using it, okay? It's just, the card just performs better with the upscaler. And FSR 3, yes, FSR 3 is also a new thing and will be released in 2023, and we also bring the generated frames, or the fake frames, that I absolutely hate. So the predicted / fake frames like the LSS3, which AMD calls fluid motion like on the TVs. So yeah, but anyway, they don't mention any hardware lock, and this is the interesting part. It means that maybe if you are an NVIDIA user like RTX 3000, you can use FSR 3.0, and if you have an RX 6000 or 5000, you can use the FSR 3.0, meaning that if this is free, if this is not hardware locked like the LSS 3, well, this will be a very, very big thing, even if it is based on fake frames and generated frames. So yeah, they also show the FSR 3 on the Unreal Engine 5 demo, and they do not talk about the latency as well, because the LSS 3 kind of adds latency because they are actually using fake frames in between the real frames. And we will also have more latency on the FSR 3, that's for sure, but will it be as much as the DLSS 3 latency? This is the big if, because if the latency is not as much as the LSS 3 and FSR 3 can actually be used across several generations of cards, well, then the LSS 3 will be dead in no time. Let's see what AMD brings. Still in terms of software, we have once again more shots fired at NVIDIA. Let's watch.
That I love most about Adrenalin. First, it's the fact that all these features are within one unified UI. And second, it's a completely unlocked experience, meaning we don't force you to create an account. You're not going to be monitored by us. You're not going to be tracked. You can just access all these features. You can customize your system to your content and just play the games you love, because that's what you deserve.
And now we have a really interesting thing where AMD actually wants to simplify things, because we have the Radeon Boost, we have the FSR, we have the Radeon AntiLag, but they are actually mixing all these things. I believe it's FSR plus the Radeon AntiLag in just one option called Hypr-RX mode, which will be also released in 2023. So as you can see here, on Dying Light 2 we actually have a massive increase in performance because we're using an upscaler, FSR 2.0 I believe, or 2.1, plus the Radeon AntiLag, and we have way more FPS while also having way lower latencies. And this is what we actually want. We don't want the same latency like the LSS 3, we don't want the same latency and higher FPS, because you'll have higher FPS, it will be smoother, but at the same time it will feel slower in your hand because you'll have higher input lag. So you'll have 120 FPS, but you'll have the input lag of 60 FPS, while in this case it seems that you'll actually have less input lag than with the native with no Hypr-RX mode. So I'm really excited to see what AMD brings in this scenario. And once again we have the AV1 codec. I don't really know why AMD didn't do this like just in one time, why they need to mention AV1 codec once again. But now we actually have an example of the AV1 encoding on streaming at 3500 Mbps, with hardware encoding being up to 7 times faster than software AV1 encoding. And as you can see in the image, the AV1 encoder is way better in terms of quality than the previous encoder used. I believe it was the AVC. It was just way better. At 3500 Mbps it was way better, the quality was way better. So at 10,000 Mbps it will be maybe as good as 20,000 Mbps with the AVC encoder, the H.264. So this is a massive, just a massive increase, okay? For me, in terms of recording, I will just save so much space while having the same, yes, this is, yeah, while having the same image fidelity, which is great. And almost ending the premiere, AMD actually introduced one more really interesting thing, which is Smart Access Video. And this one is just for people using the Ryzen 7000 series and the RX 7000 series. It will most likely come later to the previous generations like AMD Smart Access Memory, but for now it is only for the 7000 series CPUs and 7000 series GPUs. Once again, Smart Access Video, which basically divides the encoding and decoding workload across the CPU and GPU at the same time, bringing up to 30% higher results, basically 1/3 of the encoding or decoding time, because it uses the CPU and the GPU to do the same workload. It just divides the workload across both. For people that actually live out of this, make videos, encode, decode, this is a huger this is a huge step. This is a really huge step in order to save time, and in this industry, time is money. So great. And to finalize, they show what everyone wanted to know by then, which was the price. I myself didn't believe it. I thought it would be around $1,200, maybe $1,300, maybe pricing it a bit below NVIDIA counterparts, while still getting way more money, but they didn't actually do that. They actually maintained the price of the previous generation, with a 7900 XTX with $999, so $600 less than the 4090, $200 less than the 4080 16GB, and with the 7900 XT at $899, so $900, $700 less than the 4090, and of course, I mean, $300 less than the 4080 16GB. It's just a massive deal, and NVIDIA will definitely need to lower the prices or they'll die. They won't sell any cards anymore because people will actually wait, because the availability will just be on December 13th. So we'll actually have to wait a lot. So we have to wait like 5 weeks, and for some people they can't wait 5 weeks, but for people with actual brains or people that don't need the GPUs ASAP, well, it is a no-brainer. $600 less, same or even better rasterization performance, lower ray tracing performance, 24GB VRAM, an amazing compute performance, more features. I mean, it's crazy. Now that's all for today's event recap, okay? There were a little bit more things in between, but this was the major. I'm actually surprised that the new cards have lower frequencies than the previous ones. So the 7900 XT should be like the 7900, so the XTX should be the XT, while the XT version should be the should be the non-XT, okay? That's why it just runs at 2 GHz. I don't know if the 7800 XT or the 7700 XT will run at higher or lower frequencies, depending if the 7700 XT is monolithic. It will most likely run at 3 GHz, while the new chiplet designs will run at lower frequencies with more compute units, like the 7800 XT. But we need to wait and see the next prices and the high tier and mid tier and even the low tier prices to actually make a judgment. But so far, AMD is killing it in terms of price performance, and NVIDIA said that they couldn't actually decrease prices because the production costs were way higher. But believe me, they will decrease them a lot now that AMD actually presented something interesting and way less expensive. Once again, thanks a lot for watching. Leave your comment in the comment section and see you in the next video.